see there's sort of the linear or somewhat linear transition from, supplying matcha to having a cafe that has a focus on that. But now it sounds like the main part of what you do is really, the website, the community that sits around that, and podcasts, etc. But what sort of drove that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I've only been able to articulate that recently. I think now I see your ultimate dream life, or seizing your yay, or whatever you want to call it, finding your purpose. There's lots of different ways to describe it. But I used to think of it as this destination that I'd walked away from corporate. I'd done the big leap, patting myself on the back for like 5 years. I got out of the comfort zone. I'd never have to do it again. Like, this is my life. Yeah. 3 or 4 years in, the startup hustle, winging it method suddenly became very serious, big contracts, massive purchase orders, much bigger risk. And it almost became less about the product and more about just the logistics of getting it overseas and getting all the food and beverage approvals and regulatory stuff, and going into the US is just a total disaster. Like, there's so many, like 25 forms every time you need to get anything in. And I suddenly realized what this business requires of me now versus what it required of me at the start, and also what I require of life at this chapter of my life is different. And for about a year, I think I held on because I was worried that I was a millennial with a short attention span that couldn't stick at a job for more than 3 years. But eventually I realized your comfort zone catches up with you. So even though I'd taken one big step, 3-4 years later, of course, everything's changed again. And rather than seeing my purpose as like a static thing that I'd found in matcha, maybe matcha was a stepping stone to the next thing and the next version of what my best delivery and best way of serving the world is. So I started to see things as a jigsaw puzzle, and every experience you have is like giving you better new pieces and getting rid of old ones that don't work. And once matcha got to the global, like, mass market level, I was no longer the right guardian. I was absolutely holding it back by trying to wing my way through Woolworths pitches for, like, purchase orders that were bigger than the entire sales we'd made up until that point, going into meetings totally blind and holding it back. And then it was holding us back from our strengths, which is the storytelling and the beginning of the innovation of a new product and a new community. And also the behind the scenes stuff that I wanted to talk about, all the imposter syndrome, self-doubt, burnout, all of the like nitty gritty stuff. There wasn't really a platform for that. You can't put that on your business page. You didn't get your match today because I had a panic attack and then I couldn't do any work. Like, you don't put that on your business page. So I was starting to sort of shift without even realizing that I was doing that. I was seeking out the missing jigsaw pieces by having conversations, by having coffee dates with people and having these behind the scenes chats, and then sharing dribs and drabs of it on my personal page because that felt like the right forum. And then that was almost getting more traction among fellow business owners than the this is how you do your BAS kind of information that I was putting out on the business side of things. And more I realized as that kept growing, actually my next chapter was the storytelling. It was not that I need to sell matcha for the rest of my life, but that I need to talk to other people who are stuck on autopilot circuit in whatever form that looks like for them. I want to break that circuit to make a conscious decision about where they're best positioned, and to not ever get to the end of their life and think, oh my God, I ended up here by default. Not because I chose, but because I just kept going the way I was and I never thought about anything else. And so that's how Seize the Yay was like the next iteration was, okay, once I knew that, how do I start to make little moves one by one to kind of ultimately make a big shift?
Yeah, it's interesting that there's so much inertia that we just get stuck into, whether it comes to your career, your business, relationships, money, like all of these things, that it is that, we've all got fear, and fear is good in that it stops us from doing silly things sometimes. But then when the psychology sort of layer comes over the top, that it's not taking that risk in business, or not taking that step in your career, or not doing that investment, or trusting that relationship and leaning into it, that it's safe in that day, but it actually holds you back from living a bigger life. These are all things that are you got to put that risk out there to get the reward that can come. You're probably not going to get it every single time unless you get pretty lucky or fortunate. But yeah, there's a lot of that that does slow people down, and yeah, it's great to see more resources for people to I suppose lean into the fear and push through it as well.